I guess let me listen up a little bit. Um, for my allies out there, and I'll talk about white allyship and then non-white people of color allyship as kind of two different things. Um, but they both fall a bit, or both groups suffer from one thing that has been a disease that affects the world, and it's this idea of its proximity to whiteness. So the closer you are to white, the more acceptable, the more comfortable, the more appropriate it is. You've seen this as groups have immigrated into the United States. You had the First Nations people who were not white.
On Zoom.
You had the white European settlers who've come, the African slaves. Europeans tried East Indian slavery as well. That didn't work. They tried to enslave Native Americans. That didn't work either. And then every group that's come after that. And you have the history of, well, Italians aren't white, Greek aren't white. But slowly but surely, those groups all get brought into the fold to continue the myth of white superiority, to continue and propagate this myth of white superiority because you're in the group. Same has happened, unfortunately, with our Arab brothers and sisters, as well as our Desi, our East Indian brothers and sisters. Unfortunately, when traumatic events in our nation's history happen, global geopolitical events, 9/11, Iraq, any of those kind of events happen, those groups get reminded just how not white they are. And so there's this yo-yo effect that happens between Black, liberation, Black progressive thought, and non-Black communities of color that are struggling with similar issues of post-colonial effects of quasi, similitude racism, if you will. You have to own those things. And it's super uncomfortable because the communities do not want to admit, even though there's skin bleaching cream that's sold, there's contact lenses and the fawning over kids that have blonde hair and blue eyes from some of these groups, it's internalized racism. And until people own that that's a part of their trauma, their post-colonial trauma, they won't ever really be effective allies. So in non-Black communities of color, there has to be an admission that the vestiges of colonialism, European colonialism, are still affecting them to this day. And you're never going to really be an appropriate ally when that white superiority thinking and mentality is so deeply entrenched in your culture. Because you're always going to assume, what was Mr. Floyd doing? What was he doing to have the cop arrest him in the first place? Why was he there? He must have been doing something wrong. This assumption of Blackness as wrong has to change. And that will never change when you have an internalized white superiority or inferiority complex for some communities. Very much similar for white communities, there has to be an admission that we are part and parcel in benefiting from this system that has been set up over the last several hundred years. I would not be where I am today, George Washington Smith or Preston Howell III, without the racist, advantages that my ancestors had. And that I benefit from that. Even though I never owned a slave, I still benefit from all the systems that were built upon that slavery, that were taking advantage of people in Jim Crow era, that took advantage and made monumental monetary gains in redlining and allowed people to gain immense wealth while other people were prohibited from that. Individuals in those communities have to understand that they did not get to where they are from their own merit. They had hundreds of years of a head start. Their competition was shackled with chains. You have to understand those things, as discomforting as that fact is, that is an indelible aspect to where we are in 2020. And until you wash those kind of things out of your brain, you're going to struggle to be an effective ally to Black liberation and progress for the Black community, both in the United States as well as around the world. So my aspiration is for people to fully understand and grasp the vestiges of the pervasive, you know, just, I don't know what word accurately describes the evil that was put out throughout the world so many hundreds of years ago to distribute this anti-Black sentiment throughout the world from sea to shining sea. You can go anywhere in the world and you find that. And how? It was exported and consumed from European distributors all the way into each community that they colonized.